Hey, everybody. We're about going to start right in here pretty soon. But I just wanted to, first of all, say that, one of the most exciting things that's happened since this whole thing started happened yesterday for me, which is the announcement of a Parks and Rec episode. I don't know if you saw this or not, but the Parks and Rec characters, it's one of my top 3 all-time favorite shows. If you don't watch Parks and Rec, it's like an unbelievably hilarious, brilliantly written show.
Now, is it going to include everybody, like Chris Pratt?
Yep, it's going to include everybody. Rob Lowe, the whole 9 yards, and they actually wrote an episode to do via Zoom, as if the coronavirus is happening in Pawnee, Indiana, to air next Thursday night. I think it's off. They're doing it for charity type thing, like a donation type thing. But it is. It can just imagine,
that could work. I have to say that the Saturday Night Live, I know they tried, and it was a noble effort. I thought it was completely unfunny. I didn't think, and maybe it's because there was no crowd reaction, but
Parks and Rec never had a laugh track, right?
Right.
So, exactly. And you can imagine like Amy Poehler, who plays the character of like trying to get you can imagine her reaction to what this would be like, to how to handle a social distancing. It's a really fun. It's just a funny concept, and they can tell that they're gonna. I think it's wonderful, and I would expect other shows like to do this kind of thing, because it makes sense. They're gonna. I can't imagine the ratings are gonna be unbelievable. I mean, what people don't realize about these shows like Parks and Rec and Friends and The Office is that they're bigger now than they were when they were on the air. That they have the following that they have from Netflix and Hulu and all that. Those shows are huge now. They're enormous. Like, the popularity of those shows is just way bigger. So if you were to do a new episode of anything like that to try to raise money for this, what a great idea,
Now, Kevin, I wanted to ask you, because the last time you were on was last Friday, and I saw the first 2 episodes, and like 6 million people saw the first 2 episodes of the Last Dance, the ESPN look at the Chicago Bulls. And it makes me sad in a way, because I don't think I'm that old, and it's like people who watched that, who were in their 20s and 30s, didn't realize how great Michael Jordan was. It was like I was struck by like people on Twitter saying, "Oh my God, I never knew Jordan was this great."
You are old. That's what it is. We are.
Well,
old.
I mean, that's the thing I've said too about Gretzky is that you really have to be over 40 to, and almost my age to have gotten the full. Gretzky experience, and the same is true of Jordan. It's sad. I haven't actually seen that. I'm looking forward to watching that.
They'll probably run the first 2 episodes again before 3 and 4. They usually do.
But I do want to see that. But I mean, I feel so privileged that in my lifetime I've seen some incredible athletes. Obviously, Michael Jordan and Gretzky and Lemieux.
I feel like I'm the perfect. I am 52 years old, and I'm the perfect age for Wayne Gretzky, because I was a senior in high school. I mean, I was a freshman in college in 1987. So you're looking at like when the Oilers and the Flyers play in the Stanley Cup finals, and that's probably the height of Gretzky's career right about then. So I really completely I got to see.
But I think it started much before then. To me, to truly appreciate how great he was, you got to have seen, the 215.
For sure, no question.
That to me, that's when.
And I did, because I was like 11, 12 years old.
Because we had never seen an athlete who was that much better than everyone else.
Yeah.
We've never seen anything like that.
Well, we were lucky, Ken, because yesterday we had Pierre LaRouche on the show, and he played. His career started, I think, in 74, 75 season.
Right.
And he was like one of those unique people. He played against Bobby Orr when Bobby Orr was still Bobby Orr. He played against Gretzky at his height, at his greatest impact, and he played against Mario at the beginning of his career. And he's based in Pittsburgh, and he said of the 3, Mario was the one. And that's just probably personal preference. But I mean, we're lucky. Like, I remember seeing Orr as a 7 or 8 year old. I mean, I don't remember all of it clearly, but I did see him, and I saw Gretzky and I saw Lemieux. So yeah, it's just weird how, time passes and you just take into consideration the fact that Jordan was this unbelievable player, and people forget, they see LeBron, they see Kobe, and they think, oh, those guys are the best of all time. And to my opinion, they don't touch Jordan.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I'd probably say Jordan too, but I mean, LeBron has been pretty incredible.
Sure.
So I really do. And we've talked about this before, but I'm always accused of being a cop out because I separate, those players by their one distinct talent. Like in my time, I never saw a better goal scorer than Mario. Like on breakaways, he was the best breakaway guy I ever saw.
By far.
And Tom Laidlaw has said he was the only player that he ever played against that intimidated him. Even Wayne Gretzky, like he wasn't afraid to go against Wayne Gretzky, even though obviously Gretzky did well against him. But he said Mario was intimidating. Like he was so big that you knew you were going to have trouble, and he was so skilled. And because Wayne was smaller, it didn't have the same impact on him. Yeah, sure, he eventually got dominated by him, but it wasn't as intimidating as going against a big guy who could do that to you. And I saw Orr, growing up, and because that was the heyday of my fandom, and what he was the most revolutionary player.
Yeah,
I mean, he just changed the game. You can't even describe that. And of course, I also saw Gordie Howe, and I just thought he was just the best all-around player because he had a physical presence. He was downright mean. He had an incredible shot. Like people have forgotten that they clocked his and they didn't have a gun back then, but they did the mathematics on his shot and said it was like 100 and some miles an hour.
Yeah.
So,
I'll tell you what I think the difference is. Gretzky, we all heard about him, and he's, he was a couple years young. Well, I think he's like a year younger than me or a year older. I can't remember now. But we all read about him when he was playing in Canada, and we're in the U.S., and he's one of the few guys that lived up to the hype that we heard about before they got here, because we would always hear about different players in different sports. Oh, this guy's the next this, or this guy's going to be unbelievable, or this guy's – and the amount of hype that I remember even reading about Gretzky, even before we saw him, was unbelievable. And he lived up to it.
He's 59, Russ.
Oh, yes, he's a few years older. Okay.
Yeah. So there you go.
Older. And so that's the thing. I looked forward to seeing him after reading about him, and then it sort of dawned on me he was like, the Babe Ruth of his sport. Like Babe Ruth was so much better than everybody else in his sport that's how I viewed Gretzky after a while.
Well, Babe Ruth is an apt comparison for another reason as well. When Babe Ruth played, his name was synonymous with the game.
Right.
And the same is true of Gretzky.
Yep.
When Gretzky was traded, it really was like Babe Ruth getting traded.
Well, I'll tell you what got me about Babe Ruth, Kevin. I did a lot of research on him, and the thing that got me about him was when they did the tour and they went to Japan, people over in Japan already knew who he was, but it's like, how did you know about him?
I'll tell you why, because I actually have done this with Gordie Howe, and it's those newsreels.
Yeah.
Newsreels.
Okay.
Like people, I met a guy who grew up in Malta, and when he moved to the United States, he told me that he knew everything about Gordie Howe because the only hockey he ever saw growing up was newsreels about how good Gordie Howe was.
Yeah, Russ, don't you remember that story that Bob Costas told in Ken Burns Baseball about Babe Ruth, where the Japanese soldiers in the Pacific, when they were yelling insults at the Americans?
Oh yeah.
And he said, "Screw Babe Ruth," and that was their reference of Americans back in the day.
Right, they knew. That's crazy. All right, here we go. Ready?
Yeah.
That was already hockey related, but we'll continue as if it's as if the show's beginning now. Hello, hockey world. It is Friday, April 24th, 2020.
I'm Michael Agello, and I can't slam the Buffalo Bills for the first-round pick because they didn't have one.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology, and I remain unfazed by the draft. I don't even love what the Jets did, but
I'm Kevin Allen, and I'm still a free agent.
And I'm Eklund. You're watching HockeyBuzzcast on HockeyBuzz.com. This is the podcast that can't offer Kevin Allen enough to not be a free agent. But we're happy to have him with us today, and happy to have him with us on Hockey Buzz as a columnist right now. But and we we're really happy to have you guys all watching it today. It's a Friday, which means that Kevin is here, which is fantastic. I know we didn't kind of arrange that with Kevin. We sort of just made Kevin be a Friday guest, but I think you'll be on every Friday.
It seemed to work out well. There you go.
Because during this period of time, no one can really blow you off. They can't really say, you know what, I'm busy. It's just everyone's pretty much.
Yeah. I mean, they can, but
you can. It's hard. It's hard to. And yeah, we're really excited. I feel as if, okay, and I'm going to be the optimist again, and feel free to shoot this down, Mike. But I feel as if we have seen the bottom of our hockey angst, and because we're starting to see things like, okay, the draft, teams returning. I just feel like we're on the rise. Like I feel like that, there has to be a bottom somewhere, and it feels like it was a couple weeks, like a week ago, maybe to me, where there was no hope or no news at all. And I'm not saying that this is anyone's definite about anything here because we still don't know. But it feels like to me like we are on our way back, and I'm just praying that that's the case, obviously, for everything that's happening and everybody stays safe. But then let's start with Kevin, because Kevin, you had a great story the other day, and you talked about people you had talked to, and the neutral sites thing, which was a really great breaking story out there. So what are your thoughts on all of that?
Well, I agree with you to a certain extent. I do think everybody is operating as if we're definitely going to give this a go. I mean, we're going to try to play, and I think everybody's on board with that. And the neutral site game, originally they looked at non-NHL cities, and then they decided, that doesn't make sense because the logistics of trying to retrain people, even things like television, the camera positions, would have to all be reconfigured, and it'd be better to go into NHL arenas. And obviously, although nobody is talking about this, you're not going to go to New York where it's a hot spot, and you're not going to go to Detroit, where I live, because, we're a hot spot.
Right.
So, you're looking at some of the places where they have great ice and, good places to go that aren't being overrun by the virus. So I think it's a good plan. I think the players will sign off on all this. I think their situation will be a little better than baseball's because it won't be 4 months. It'll be less than that.
Yeah.
And I understand completely, having talked to everyone, why they want to continue the regular season. There's some fairness to that. It gives everyone a chance that was on the outside of the playoffs, but we're scrapping to get in. Teams like the Rangers and the Minnesota Wild, gives them all that. However, as I've been beating the drum, and nobody has been able to answer this, and everyone kind of chuckles nervously when I ask them this, and because there really is not an answer yet, is what happens if a player tests positive.
Right.
Now, I'm guessing that Gary Bettman and Bill Daly, and I'm sure Don Fear in his mind has an idea as well. But, we saw a trial balloon on the draft, which we're going to discuss pretty soon.
Yeah.
And, rarely do people admit that it was a trial balloon, but Gary Bettman did. Gary Bettman said that, this was simply a trial balloon.
Right.
And I guarantee you Gary Bettman is not going to trial balloon what he's thinking about the
right.
About what happens when someone tests positive, because that's the big question. Like, if we get all this going, and this is all well intentioned, this is all pretty well thought out, but until we can answer that question, not only from the standpoint of player safety, but also from the aspect of the competitiveness and having a real competition, until we answer that, I don't think we can, move ahead.
Well, I have to say, as the head of the Pessimists Hockey Writers Association, I was actually optimistic. I've been saying from the outset, I thought that the season was going to continue in some form. And Kevin, I'm encouraged not only by what you wrote, but also Pierre LeBrun and a couple others who talked about and I think this is the right idea. The NHL is not locking themselves into just 4 venues. LeBrun reported yesterday they're looking at as many as 12, and not to play in 12, but to have backups in case there are flare-ups in other places, and that's smart. That means to me they're planning on that eventuality, and they can move this quickly from one venue, say Toronto to Buffalo or Buffalo to Columbus, based on a spike of COVID-19.
The one thing I can tell you is looking up stats and everything, there's over 858,000 positive cases in the United States. And as of like March, the end of March, when South Korea was testing, they were like testing like just 50% to 75% better than we were.
Yeah.
We haven't seen that much improvement in testing yet. So even though I am confident in certain things, like I know the draft is going to happen, and I'm confident we'll have a season, there is something in me, a voice that still screams and says, I still need to see better testing, like all across the board, all these different states, because I don't see it yet. It's talked about, it's hoped about, but we don't actually see it.
Here's the question. I'm going to be like a little bit of not a pessimist as well here, just for a second. And with in regards to testing, I mean, we don't see more when we see more testing, which we all know we need to see, and we all know we need to have a perspective of it. The reaction to the more testing will the result of that, if you play it out, is way more cases, right? Because the idea here is that we have. And part of me feels like the testing is low because they don't want people, the conspiracy theorists, they don't want people to know how many cases there are really out there. Is it 10 times as high as that? Are there 8 million people infected with this thing? Who knows? It's a completely, and with the more and more cases, does that take us further and further away from, as the testing improves, will that make it harder and harder for teams to justify this? What I mean?
That's sort of a double-edged sword act, because yesterday when Cuomo came out and said that they've been reviewing testing in a certain area, and what they've found is there's a higher percentage of people with the antibodies, which means it was pervasive even before February. Right. That like the cold that I had in January could have been coronavirus. So and I'm not saying those people are immune, but the people who have the antibodies more than likely are not going to get it again. So if they test players and half of them have antibodies,
Fauci keeps reminding us that may or may not be true. They think that, but they don't know that.
It's not really a safety net yet. You're right.
There have been cases in South Korea where people have hit. However, in those cases, when they go further in testing, they test the actual virus itself that is proving positive to them. The virus is dead and looks like it's a lingering effect of what they had before, so they're not actually contagious anymore.
They don't even know that, Eck.
Yeah, I know they don't know that. That's
they don't know whether they're not contagious. That's
right now we're number 2 in the world for tests per million. Italy's number 1. They've done 20,926 per million people. We've done 11,821 per million. So that's still too low. Like we're not even the leaders in that. And yet, I don't know where
getting an emergency broadcasting system from somebody.
Yeah, that's some alert from my city here. So either I'm supposed to run for the hills, or we've been.
You need to run for the hills. Run
Godzilla in the corner.
Well, I'm a true journalist. I'll just work through it. So, hey, listen, let's get down to what we're talking about here, and we're kind of straying from the hockey part of it, but let's put it in terms that everybody can sort of understand. Now, I've talked to people who think that the plan will be, now again, this has not been finalized, but in their mind, that's what they're assuming is going to happen. This is a team person who said that he thought that everyone would be tested before, and then we would be tested maybe every day. Players will.
Yep.
And that's sort of the assumption they're working on. But here's the question that I keep posing that no one has had an answer to. And I've talked to 7 different people who are kind of involved, not in the decision making necessarily, but are part of all this, that are going to have to live in this world. And they all said none of them had the answer. So the question is, okay, let's just say for the sake of Mike that the Bruins and Maple Leafs end up playing in a playoff series. Okay, and then in the third day, 2 members of the Maple Leafs test positive. So we take them out for 14 days. Okay, so they're out, but it's like having an ankle injury, like you just lose those, next man up. But okay, then the problem is we all know that even when they're asymptomatic, they were contagious. Well, 2 days later, we have 4 more players.
Right.
Now we got 6, and now we have. So, is at any point do the Maple Leafs have to just forfeit, and then the Bruins all of a sudden start showing up with it? And suddenly it's 2, then it's 3, then it's 5, then it's 7. At what point do both teams, are they just eliminated from the competition? So what happens to the brackets? We're now uneven.
Right.
Where do we go? Like this has potential to send us, we could get restarted and everything could be going well. And then one positive, because you can't catch it before it's too late, could send this all spiraling down. And we might have to close up shop again. Unless there's something I'm missing. And that's what I'm hoping somebody will tell me, where's the flaw in that? Well, how could that possibly be prevented?
Yeah. I mean, we don't have the ability to test that. I mean, the only way to test that would be to, grab 20 beer league guys, 40 beer league guys, throw them into a hotel and have them play for a couple of weeks and see what happens. Right?
We have to say this
because
the American Hockey League is shut down. These teams are going to have rather sizable taxi squads.
For sure they will.
Yeah.
But I don't think you can. It's impossible. From what I know, now I'm not a doctor, but that's just from following this as a journalist. It's impossible to, if one person has it, to prevent this from escalating.
Right.
You can't get them out quick enough. It's already too late. The minute it's still too late.
Yeah.
So I don't know how you prevent that unless, I'm not seeing something of it. But I agree with you. And I think if it was, if it turns out there's just 2 and then no one else tells positive, then I think everything's fine. Or even if it's 5, as long as nobody on the other team. So
yeah, I mean, you're going to talk about there's always guys who get sick and everything like that. I mean, but it's such a different situation, obviously. But let's talk about something that really feels like it's going to happen, and that is the draft. Like I think.
I disagree. I don't think it's for sure going to happen.
Okay.
Well, here's the thing. Let me put it out. And this is what has happened thus far that we know of.
Right?
Yeah. That, Gary Bettman said that to general managers.
Right.
Since then, there's been a lot of grousing about it. GMs really don't want to do it. And I understand why. It disrupts the way they do business. And it disrupts, their planning for the future. The little things like making, trading 1 pick to move 4 spots and all that, becomes complicated.
Yeah.
There's an unfairness in the, we're trying to figure out how we're going to reposition the draft lottery. The latest I heard, I think Bob McKenzie had it, so it's good reporting, is that we go to the old school where only one team can move up. I've heard teams are furious over that. Because they like everybody moving up. So there's so many problems to it. And, what makes it interesting to me is Gary Bettman admitted the next day, just totally admitted, I trial ballooned this.
Yeah.
I wanted to see what the reaction was.
Right.
Well, the interesting thing is, and Pierre LeBrun reported this yesterday on the same thing that Bob McKenzie talked about. He said that he had spoken to 28 teams, representatives of 28 teams, and that 15 of those teams basically said a hard no, that they would not buy in to having a draft in they're talking about early June, not like late June, closer to when they would be playing games if they resume the season in July. So there are a number of hoops that they would have to jump through, Kev. The one that I'm trying to grasp is, how can you determine spots in the lottery when you're going to continue the regular season afterward? The lottery is based on teams making or missing the playoffs. That's not going to be determined until the teams play a full 82 games. And how can you hold the draft lottery and hold the draft when the regular season isn't complete?
I think this is where you roll it back to 68. I think that's what you have to do.
I think you have to roll it back to 68.
Well, I think you just don't do it. Like, nobody wants to do this. Like, the argument is that it's going to create this interest and keep it, hockey in the minds of people. But, this isn't the NFL draft, like, at least in America. Now in Canada, where I don't think you have to, keep hockey in the minds of people, that's always there, even during a pandemic. But in America, it's not going to be like the NFL where we've watched these players. We're not going to know beyond the top 10 maybe at
You
best.
know what? I don't know anybody beyond the top 10 in the NFL, and I was watching. I think
No, Ross. You can't even compare that. I mean, think about this. You've got allegiance.
It's the same as any athlete. You don't know them if you don't know them. I mean,
it doesn't matter because we have a built-in rooting interest in conferences, in schools. We know the history. We have experts who can kind of fill us in. We know how the process works. We don't really have that infrastructure built in for hockey.
Okay. Well, let me ask you this. The biggest downside of not doing it are all the expiring contracts, and there's a ton of them.
Yeah, well, yeah, and the fact that it's up the trades, which I think people look forward to the trades, and you can't really. I know, Eklund, you've said that they should be allowed to make trades, but you can't do it before you start the playoffs. Like, have a second trade deadline.
Kevin, we're in a different world. I mean, it's like I want to. I mean, like, it's so funny because.
But hold it. But
Kevin, your thought, and then I want to talk because I talked to one owner currently, one owner previously about this yesterday, and I'll give you a very differing look at that whole thing. Okay, so but go ahead.
All I was going to ask, Kev, is has anybody given a retort to what are you doing about the expiring contracts for scouts and it's for a lot of management too? Like, what can be done about that?
Well, in the CBA, it says that you have to, when your contract expires, it says you still have to play the playoffs, even if the contract goes. So
these are non-players. These are non-players. These are scouts and assistant general managers and a lot of.
I think you just offer everybody a 2-week extension.
Yeah.
You think we're going to pay them for another?
Yeah. I mean, why is that so difficult?
But it'll be more than 2 weeks because. You think this? I mean, if
you hold the draft
in 2 weeks,
why can't you just do what you normally do? And like they're signing players for next season, then decide what you're going to do for your.
You still need those guys at the table. You don't have them at the table. It's not like you're going to be able to look through all. They don't have a list of 250 guys.
How is that? How is trying to get keep them longer? Any different than when a new GM is taken over and these guys know that they're going to, be out of work come July 1st?
I'll tell you how, because they're already furloughing other workers. Why would they want to keep these guys on? And it'll be probably another month or two.
Well, then I guess they'll just do that.
Yeah, but Russ, like we said yesterday,
they've already had their scouting meetings, so the GM kind of knows how everybody feels about the players. I guess they let them go then. I guess.
Russ, like we said yesterday, one of the concerns might be, a scout whose contract is up June 30th. He goes to sign with another team, and he brings all of his information with him. So it's like
I talked to somebody about. Let me get into this for a second because so first of all, the scout thing, okay? Because I talked to somebody. I talked to a current owner and a past owner yesterday about this stuff, and the current owner said, listen, the scout thing is this, like, we have a bunch of scouts. Like, there are a bunch of scouts that are being hired by teams, right? And their contracts do end at the end of June, just like Russ is saying. And if you were to make that decision now, like I said, why don't you just extend them? Like, why don't you just I said the same exact thing, Kevin. I'm like, well, you're good. They're good or not. Let's just extend them. He's like, yeah, but we can't do, I mean, then we just paid for a whole year for nothing. He's like, If they leave us June 30th, I mean, we might not like them, but they still have information. We might think that we want to change them, but they still have information. That information, we need that information, and we can't expect them to just these guys aren't.
They have the information. What they're really afraid of is just what either Mike or Russ just said, that they'll go to another team. And
I think but even in the case where I didn't get the impression that was so much the case with the guy I was talking to, because he said these are guys that he doesn't want anymore. So if he doesn't want them anymore,
well, then cut him.
Let him go to another team. He doesn't want.
But they have proprietary information. They could give a spreadsheet to their new team of every pick or every player.
Right. And not only that, but he said, listen, not only do they have their information, but they have our information. Like because scouts work together. So like you have a coordination scout. So like if you're firing a guy, he knows the whole team strategy, not just his strategy. But
I think the whole team strategy.
So you're like,
well, that's true. But
you lose like that quorum at the table. The GM may have the reports, and he may still have his director of scouting, but a lot of times those guys get their minds changed by these scouts who won't be able to be there and say anything.
Exactly, and that's what he brought up too. He said there was an example last year of a player they were going between 2 or 3 different players in like the second round.
Right.
And there was one scout that they knew they were going to fire. They just felt like he was just didn't do anything really. But he did cover one of those teams that this one guy that they were thinking about was involved with, and a lot. Like he covered like five of the 20 teams they wanted him to, but one of the teams he covered was the team that they were going to make a decision on this guy. Right. So they called him up, and even though they knew they were going to fire him a couple of days later, before July, that this was going to be it. The information was invaluable, and they all felt like, okay, well, at least we got our money's worth for this guy for the last year because of that one phone call where we got information on him for that one. And sometimes that's all you can hope for. You're not paying these guys a ton of money. These scouts aren't making $1 zillion. Some of them
Kevin, I don't know if it's feasible for these scouts or any official for a team to be extended, their contract to be extended by 3 months, because if the draft would be held in September or October, that would cover it. I mean, I know that yesterday the NHL and the IIHF extended their agreement for another year in the midst of all these player transfers going on. So they were able to do that with the current situation going on. So I can't understand.
Yeah, to me, I would just extend the guys you're going to extend, and guys that you're going to let go. And, I understand that, because usually what happens when you get down, and Russ knows this to be true, and there's lots of stories about it that's similar to what you said. We're down in the 7th, and the head of the scouting will say, well, who wants to make a case for somebody? And somebody will go, I saw this guy 13 times, and I know that he can't skate.
Right.
But I'm telling you, he's going to improve, and he's got a big heart. Yeah. And I know the family. I know, his brother. And the guy who, has the loudest voice or the most compelling case, wins. So I do understand that. But I think when you're talking about a 7th round pick, I just don't think that's enough to kind of disrupt the whole after the season you hold the draft and make big trades type event, and have it earlier when it's just going to seem disjointed because you're not going to be able to make the trades, and you're not going to be able to maneuver. Sometimes trades are made with a 1st round pick involved in it, and that's not going to happen. So I don't know. I think the negatives outweigh the benefit, if there is a benefit.
Let me go further into this, because my trade concept is it's just a concept. That's obviously nothing that. And then when one of the guys I bounced it off of just laughed at me, and the other said you could see them being the NHL's going to have to be creative. So yeah, maybe that was the concept that. And I'm forget about the trade concept for a second. The real concept here. And the difference between the general managers, and I've found, and you know this, Kevin, from talking to people over the years, there's a big difference between how the GM views it and how an owner views it,
Right, for sure.
And the owner's looking at this like, okay, we're coming back at the end. We're trying to, I asked him about the May 15th thing too, because that was thrown out there yesterday, right? That May 15th, they want the teams to start like informally working out so they can start working out in June. That May 15th thing, he said, is just like, is basically not that, he said at all. He just said it's a guideline. He says, you got to just to tell the guys, we got to get in shape, make sure you're ready, and start trying to find ways here. Because if you're someplace else, start working on that now, because you're going to have to get here. And because getting in hockey shape versus getting in regular shape, you're not going to get in hockey shape until they hit the ice. That's just the reality of it. They can't do it. But that's the interesting thing about our sport. So, so here's the thing. So I say to him, I'm like, so he's like, so look at this. We have we're saying May 15th. That's just, don't forget about that for a second. But say we do start actually training the middle of June, like say June 20th or something like that. And we do it for 2 weeks, roughly. And we get into July 4th beginning or whatever, or somewhere in there we start. He said, so we have so June 20th, we start training. So think about that like June 15th or so, we start getting excitement about that. We start getting people writing about it. We start getting them fired up. And he says, so his thing is, so if you're going to do that and put the draft in the middle of that, they would rather have the draft in the beginning of June where they can build excitement for something else in June that would then continue, that would like build momentum from one thing to the other to the other.
Well, and I could say one more thing, Ek, which I'm not sure came up in your conversation, but a lot of these kids, again, we don't know what the other leagues are going to do.
Right.
But if you're not drafting them until September, October, they will already have their minds made up where they're going and what they're doing. And teams like to sometimes change a path that a guy's on.
For
and
sure.
They won't be able to. Like, it'll already be decided. Like, these guys, if a college season starts on time, even if there's no fans, they can't pull them out of college. So no matter what, they're going to be.
No, and that's a great point. And GMs, of course, are going to hate. The beginning of June is a real mess, because even if you had it at the end of June, everything's been so disrupted, and there's been a sort of assumption going around with some of the guys that are like, we're not doing this till I don't think about the draft now because it's not going to happen until, whenever it's going to happen.
Yeah, people don't, by the way, teams don't want to have the draft in late June either. They want to have it after the season.
So their mindset has been different,
Right.
So,
well, that was the thing that I was taken aback by yesterday, Kev, was the fact that they were talking about early June. They're talking like June 6th or June 10th, and I'm like, you're fast forwarding, like, because they're prepared to for the draft in late June, close to July 1. Those 2 or 3 weeks.
All right, Mike.
Mike. Like, they are so far ahead of where they normally are on the draft because we just had Brad Smith on our podcast, Bob Duff and I, and he basically said they've been talking about the draft for a month because the
owner I talked to said we had less viewers. The owner I talked to said we told our guys flat out a month ago that you have nothing else to do right now but worry about the draft. So
so they're ready to go, but that isn't. I don't know that makes it better. That we got to have it now. Like, if you're ready to go, you're ready to go, but you'll be ready in September too.
You see the news cycle aspect of this, Kevin, for the owner's perspective. There's a news
I don't see that it's a big deal. I don't see that it's going to create the buzz. Now, at least not in America.
But they just saw last night the ratings of the NFL draft.
Oh,
I'm not saying, but even the WNBA draft, right? Well, this was brought to me yesterday too, right?
Yeah,
it had 127% more viewers than it did.
You want to know why? You want to know why? Because the New York Liberty had 6 first-round picks.
But even so, I don't think it's just
and they had a number 1 pick that had. She had been in the news cycle.
Yeah,
everyone's talking about her.
For sure.
There was a lot going on.
The ratings would go up.
It was the first sporting event. There was a lot of issues. I just don't think that it will create the buzz that makes it, I just think the draft would be better and more more interesting after the season when, all of a sudden you can
I don't think so.
Have the big trades.
I hate it. I'm not.
The only thing I can tell you from
I'm not trying to disagree with anybody here, but I got to finish this thought. Sorry. But I'm not throwing my personal opinions here as much as I'm just saying what I was told and giving you the perspective of what I was hearing. Right. Mm-hmm. So, like, my personal opinions, I'm with you. Like, I'm 100% with you that the draft should be held probably after the season. I mean, even though I think if it's going to be held now, let's have trades and make it interesting. But I think but the thing that was just constantly referred to me is like there is no way here that the NHL is going to. They are seeing a huge drop off in traffic to NHL.com. They're seeing a huge drop off in traffic to all the team websites. I'm seeing a huge drop off. Everybody who's involved in hockey right now sees that this is falling fast. So to them, they see the great ratings of the NBA, the WNBA. They see the NFL and all the publicity it gets. And let's admit it. What the NFL is basically like. The NFL draft is like a sports, like a big version of a sports talk show to me. That's what it is, right? So they see this, but it gets people talking, it gets people excited. I didn't watch a second of it last night, but that's because I'm not an NFL fan necessarily. But there are people who are going to be glued to it, tonight, tomorrow, and all day Saturday, and most of the folks on this panel probably will be. So, but here's the thing: the NHL sees that, and they see their numbers falling, and they see everything dropping, and they're like, if we hold it, like you're saying. The space between the end of this season and the beginning of next season is going to be minute. It's going to be small.
Yep.
And there is going to be so much happening in that period of time that is going to be generating excitement enough as it is because you just handed off the Stanley Cup and now you're starting another season. There's enough there to keep the news people talking about things. Why not? If all these people who are putting this draft together get it in the beginning of June and then get control of these players like Russ is saying ahead of time. Be able to make your decisions on your scouts at the end of June, like you always have, and really, the benefit is just. And believe me, I dread this because I want if there's no trades in the NHL draft, that sucks for me. Obviously, it sucks for anybody who's involved in this business because it really does give a huge amount of, traffic to us the trade part of it all. But I see where they're going. I see where they're going.
I get the want of the league to stay relevant. I get that. I get the team.
It's a need, Mike.
I know. I understand. I understand that. But what I'm saying is, for the sake of relevance, they cannot bastardize themselves and to do things the wrong way simply to have a draft before.
You're saying the NHL draft.
hold
how
on.
are you bastardizing yourself with the NHL draft? It's not like you're talking about the Stanley Cup final. You're talking about the NHL draft, which we've all admitted is really like a minor story in and of itself. I mean, the worst thing that happens is we have a NHL
but the most consequential thing that happens at the draft, other than future stars being drafted in the first round, are the trades that are made at the draft.
Of course, that's true.
And if you can't have that, and
hold on,
go ahead.
Even if ratings aren't an issue, even if we say, all right, it's not going to be a bonanza, it certainly will go up. But I'm not even going with that. If you're just going strictly with data, there's no more data to be gained on any of these players.
Right.
There's no playoffs. There's no other tournaments.
Right.
All those things were canceled. That's why they're all talking about it now, because they're probably going back and looking at previous years more than they did, because they don't have as much data on guys that they're drafting this year as they did in previous years. It doesn't mean they don't have the right amount. It just means they don't have as much. So my point is, if you just wait 2 more months on that, these guys aren't going to keep talking about the draft for 4 months. It's going to get stale, and it's going to cost teams.
Who are we talking about that's talking about the draft? Who's we?
The internal employees that are supposed to be talking about the draft. If you think if they're going to keep up that same level talking from now until October, it's not going to happen. And some of them,
I think everybody's lists are done.
Yeah, but again, 2 things happen at the draft, and you still may not have exactly what you want at the table to be fully prepared for that. That's the whole thing. And, you make a mistake in the first, second round, it could cost you millions. Just saying.
I mean,
well, the fallacy of the argument that everybody's no one's reading hockey stories is that nobody's reading any sports stories.
Right.
You talk to anybody, nobody's reading MLB stories. The only people that are reading sports stories are reading the NFL draft stories that's going on. But the NFL draft is a beast. Always has been a beast.
Mm-hmm.
And guess what? When the draft is over, nobody will be reading NFL stories.
Right.
That's true.
There were 650,000 people in the streets of Nashville last year for the NFL draft. And what were they there? They were there to watch Roger Goodell on stage.
No, they wanted to drink booze and occasionally hear a pick.
Oh, yeah.
The issue on the NFL draft is just what I just stated, that it's easy to identify with the NFL draft because we have allegiances to schools and conferences and areas of the country that and we know the sort of the traditions of where good players come from. There's just a lot that kind of goes into it, even if you don't know the players. It's worth watching. And, frankly, they always do a good job. I watched the NFL draft last night, and even under trying conditions, they did an excellent job.
Oh, technically, it was excellent.
Yeah, they did an excellent job of presenting their players. And, they can present their players and put videos of them. And we can, even though if we know nothing about it, we can relate to it because we know the teams they're talking about.
Sure.
Like they say this offensive lineman had a big game against Georgia.
Right.
We know, wow, that's impressive. And, and he played, we just sort of have an understanding of how it all works. We can't do that in the NHL.
Yeah, it's different to say this guy scored a hat trick against the Sarnia Sting.
Exactly. That's the problem. Now, in Canada, it does work. I mean, bringing it on and you bring all that and everything works, but that's not where they're trying to make inroads.
But I know more all the time in the US though, Kevin. Every year it gets a little bit better in the US, and I think that's because NHL Network covering the world
better. But I just don't believe that you're going to suddenly create a buzz by having the draft.
But look at the pros and cons of. I mean, what benefit is it to throw it late? I mean, when you look at the pros and cons,
the benefit is that you do it in such a way that you don't compromise what the rules of the draft are.
Exactly.
Like you have established now, and there are people actually counting on this. And when you look on Twitter right this morning, what are they all talking about? The fact that everybody likes this. 3 teams are going to move up, and they got a shot. And now the fans in Detroit here are just thrilled because if they go to the old way, they're the worst they can do is second.
Right.
They're told. So we're going to change the rules for this grasping at some little straw that maybe for 24 hours, we're going to create and there's really no need to do it. Like I just don't know that it's
But it's not just the grasping; it's also a logistical thing, and it's also it's really. I mean, it is that space and time between the seasons that is going to be so crazy small, Kevin. I mean,
well, it will be crazy small, but this is the league that ends the season on a Tuesday, and then everybody goes to
I know
Vegas and has a celebration of the winners, and then everybody immediately gets on a plane and goes to the draft. So this is the way we do it. And
but
now
after that draft, I know they've got a little bit of time before July 1st, and then after that, they have a couple months.
We sort of established that this is the way we like to do it.
Well,
make everything in there. So.
Yeah. Last year in Vancouver, Russ and I left for home on Sunday. Monday was the beginning of the 5-day window for free agency. So they're used to this compacted.
That, Mike, it's not about that. It's about after that. It's about like they don't start the season on July 15th. Like that's what we're talking about here.
I'll give you the other
here. That's what's going to happen if we have the draft. If we have a normal draft week free agency thing in between, we're talking about like maybe November. I don't know, 10th. We're starting December 1st or whatever.
They're going to have at least 2 or 3 weeks to have free agency.
Yeah, because we're going to have free agency.
We're going to have free agency, yeah, but it's all going to.
Go ahead, Russ.
They're not going to do free agency. Let's put it this way: they're not going to say that we only have 3 days to sign free agents. So the start of the season is going to be it's not going to be 4 days after the end of this.
No.
It's going to be shorter.
The percentage of free agents that are signed, Kevin, I mean, like the wide majority of the big name free agents are signed in the first week anyway.
Well, listen, I'm just telling you what I've been told.
Other numbers.
I'm doing the same thing. Trust me. I'm not disagreeing with the sentiment that the GMs are sharing or what you're sharing with. I'm agreeing with all that, but I'm just telling you that there's this other thing out there that is weighing that these owners are worried about losing their momentum in the NHL, and they feel like the draft. Why not? And that when you're in Bettman's office, there's like next to the big Lego Stanley Cup are 4 TVs that are sitting there, and they have like the NFL network on, the NBA network on, and the MLB network on, and he sits there and he watches what's happening carefully with all those other leagues. And that matters.
Think about this. So last year with the Cup, they reached a high the NHL of like 10 million viewers, right? And that's when everything's rolling right. If NBC were to say, hey, listen, right now our ratings aren't great either, and on a Friday night, if you could give us a 2-hour show, you probably could pull in 1 million, maybe even 2 million viewers.
Sure.
That's better than what they're pulling in now for what they're showing. And that's what I think you have to look at. I know the NFL is a different beast, and yes, they jump from 6 million to 11 million, but the NHL one will jump a bit too. And again, NBC will plug the hell out of it for the next month or so because all their shows just ended. They don't have a lot of programming either now.
But in terms of it making an impact, it's like throwing a pebble in a wave crashing into the beach.
But it's better than nothing.
Here's the thing. I think I don't think it'll make a difference in terms of wins. But to be honest with you, I'm not opposed to it. If they want to do it, I'll be happy to.
I'll watch it.
Yeah, me too. I mean, I'm all in it. I just don't like. I find it contradictory that one of the reasons why that everyone seems a little upset about the point percentage and rolling back to 68 is because we have this idea that coming in we were going to play 82 games, and it just doesn't seem unfair. Now all of a sudden we're going to just change the draft rules that in such a way that some teams are significantly helped, and others who thought they had a real chance, their fan bases are now being told. And so I just don't think it's enough. Now, saying all that, if they want to do it, I'm totally on board. I mean, I understand they want to sort of create a buzz. I just don't know that they can do it with the draft. Has anyone got any idea what the NBA is planning to do?
The NBA draft.
Because no one's reading NBA stuff.
I know, no one's reading. No one's reading
anything. Paying any attention to them either, and they don't seem to be concerned about it.
And the NBA draft is generally a bigger deal.
I think the issue, they may not be concerned about the draft. I think they're concerned. Their biggest fight, Kev, is their players don't want to play in front of empty stands.
Right.
That's their biggest problem. That's why you're not hearing any discussion, because the biggest players in that sport were like, yeah, we don't really want to play
But I thought that LeBron's flipped on that.
Yeah, I'm sure he did after pressure. but that's not
Adam
really
Silver got him on speed
And
dial.
the NBA, the draft is like, yeah, it's a bigger draw than the NHL draft, but it's not. It doesn't money wise or momentum wise. I don't think the NBA looks at the money they have coming in from television and they're like, okay, we're okay.
Right.
The NHL lives hand to mouth more than any league out there, right? So that's like the reality is that to them, anything that they think of that could possibly even raise, and the one guy who is a former owner said to me, I think it's great because I think it would raise the profile of the NHL draft. I think people would watch it that never watched it before. And I think that would be kind of interesting.
Of all the nonsense that's kind of come out of your little box, that's the best thing that you said. I agree with that. I think there will be people who, by the way, I realized that it was nonsense that is coming from an owner through you, but
yes,
but
thank you.
I didn't mean it to.
You know the owner I'm talking about.
Yeah, they came out harsher than I meant it to be.
No, that's fine.
But anyway,
I can play that game, Kevin. You want to play that game? We'll play that game.
Don't you think that there's a lot of truth to that? I do think people would, just attempt to kind of go in because they'd say,
Sure.
I want to know who the top pick is.
I mean, I don't know, and yeah, I agree. I think that's the case. I'm going to drop my phone on top of your head. There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can we? There was actually a consequential signing.
Yeah.
Yesterday that I wanted to bring up because I find it interesting, Kev, after, and there was probably little or no chance that Bobrovsky was going to re-sign in Columbus after last season. In the span of a week, Jarmo Kekalainen has re-signed Korpisalo for 2 years and now re-signed Elvis for 2 years. And now between the two of them, he's spending less than $7 million on his pair of goaltenders, whereas Bobrovsky is making $10 million a year. And Russ and I have talked about this, Bobrovsky has had a terrible year in Florida. I'm not to say he's not a payroll goaltender, but I actually like Columbus's situation better than Florida.
Well, I agree, and I wonder too. And Russ, this would be something for you to weigh on, especially with the prospect thing. But what we saw last year with Tuukka Rask was reduction in the number of games and his excellent playoff performance. Yep. And you saw this year with teams, cutting down that number. Is what we see now in Columbus going to be, kind of the new norm where
it
is. They're definitely moving towards that. I think the one thing that we have to be careful with Bob is he has no backup there. If they actually got a real backup for him, they'd be able to run a better system for him too, as far as days off and everything else. He's got nothing there.
Well, that's been my complaint with the Leafs and Frederik Andersen for all these years, is that they haven't had a competent backup since they had McElhinney a few years ago. Well, they traded for Campbell, and Campbell played more than the usual backup, and Anderson's numbers went up because he was actually rested. So
I think Quenneville was playing Chris Dridger because Bob was burnt out, not because Chris Dridger is better than Bob.
But we've seen in Dallas. Khudobin and Bishop. We've seen Boston with Halak and Rask.
It looks like the Rangers are planning for Shesterkin and Georgiev, so that looks like that's their plan too. So I think that is the way it's going.
Kevin, it's going back to the way it was in the early '80s. Remember, like Chico Rolly Melanson and Billy Smith, or in Buffalo, Edwards and Sauve played 40 games each. There was a balance there.
Well, the other thing too, that Merzlikins, when he came in, everybody said he was going to be the guy. Like, I think everyone assumed he would steal the net and hold it throughout the year, but he had an adjustment problem. But boy, once he figured it out, he was every bit the guy that everyone thought he was going to be. And I wonder if that also was sort of have people kind of looking at some of the goalies who are performing well in European leagues.
Yeah.
And taking a look at them, a second look, and getting them over and see if that, because if he can do it, then there are others could too, possibly. Some may think.
For sure. I think what's interesting too, I mean, looking at the Bob signing, like in general, these big signings of big numbers to goalies, like we really do wonder if you'll see it again. Like it's one of those things, like a goalie, because the GMs are going to be really scared of goalies in general, and especially, you really have to look at the mental state of certain goalies. Like, was Bob, some players handle signing big numbers differently than others. The players who take it more to heart, that feel like now they've got to do better because they signed, they're making more money, are always disasters, right? They're like the ones that are disasters. They're the ones who are like, oh man, and I could see Bob's personality being that way. You can see that that's the kind of guy he is. Like he's a workout fiend. No one works out harder than Bobrovsky. He's crazy. He's crazy sensitive to certain things. Last year, the Blue Jackets tried to trade him at one point, and he wouldn't do it. He blocked it, and then, didn't just block it. Wouldn't give him like the list of teams that at all that he was required to give him. It was a real frustrating thing for Columbus. They were really just like dealing with the whole thing. And there's certain signs there that you could say, like maybe we shouldn't sign this guy to $1 zillion, but yet he's the best goalie available. He's won 2 Vezinas in the last couple years, so it's hard not to be tempted by that. But it really does make you wonder.
Well, what does that, does that make people think twice, signing Braden Holtby or, this summer?
At least the term of the contract. I mean, we were talking about this a couple of days ago because I've been writing stuff about, potential, compliance buyouts with certain teams. And I mean, it would take a large amount of cojones for a general manager who had just signed a goaltender to a 7-year, $70 million deal to go to the owner in year 2 and say, okay, I think we should compliance buyout Bobrovsky. He might as well hand in his notice at that point. But you look at that contract and at the age that he's at, and based on a small window of how he's performed, it might be the smartest thing for that team to do is to find a way to get out of it. But it's still going to cost Vinny Viola, $50 million to buy out a contract for even if it doesn't count on the books.
Yeah,
it's true.
Here's a question for you. It's a hockey question, and one I've been sort of asking people. Now, obviously, I think the Red Wings are going to part ways with Jimmy Howard, and they're going to have an opening for a goalie. Now, they have Bernier, who played pretty well for them this season, and the thought is, well, they'll just go with Bernier because they're not, far enough down the road. But what about, and I've sort of run this by, does it make any sense for them, because they're a young team, they're going to play a lot of young players, to bring in a guy like Braden Holtby on a shorter contract because they know they're going to get consistent quality goaltending. And it's just a little easier for them to grow when they're not worried about giving up 4 and 5 goals, a night. Now, I've run that by, and some guys I talked to around the league who have been around a long time say, nah, it's just not time not to do it. And I've talked to the other guys and said, there's something to that.
Yeah.
That, it's bad. And it's harder to grow as a young team when your back end is a mess every night. And
Marc-Andre Fleury, right?
Yeah. So anyway, I wonder what you guys think about that. Does that make any sense? Because I don't think they're going to do it, but
the obvious thing that I think of first off is getting Holtby to do that, right? Would Holtby do it?
No. Well, it depends on what his options are, because as we all know, there's always a limited market for goalies.
True. And if options are limited, then you look at it. But you also, Holtby's also such a competitor. You would wonder but he definitely the other thing about Holtby that's interesting that I think kind of helps your point out a little bit is I get the sense from talking to people that he is very dead set on knowing he's the starter. Like that is one of the most important things when he goes to someplace. He wants to be known that he's the starter, no questions asked. Like almost like a Marc-Andre Fleury situation in Vegas, where you are definitely the starter, no two ways about it. It's your job.
Well, it depends on
where teams can give him that. Teams could sign him, but there are a lot of teams out there that are always going to have people challenging for him.
It depends on what Holtby's motivation is. He's making $6.1 million. I think if he signed a 3-year deal or a 4-year deal with Detroit, he would probably need to get overpaid, and that probably wouldn't be a problem for Detroit because they have a ton of cap space. So, you pay a little more for the stability in net. You don't have to rush a young goaltender into the NHL. You draft somebody this year maybe, or sign somebody from Europe, and you allow him a couple years to develop in the American Hockey League, and you have competent goaltending at the NHL level. The only negative there is if Yzerman's plan is to continue to finish in the top 3 or 4, or get a top 3 or 4 pick and build his team that way, then having a good goaltender lowers your chances of that. But you don't want your team to be a joke either, so it's sort of a delicate balance.
I don't think Detroit's a tank town. You know,
No, I don't either. They sort of did this year a little bit. Yeah. But
everybody gets there like at one point, but it's not like something that they would be very good at being like. Toronto was okay doing it for a bunch of years. Pittsburgh was okay doing it for.
They did it for 2 years, Zach.
I know.
They finished.
I'm just having. I know. But their teams have done it for sure, right? And I agree. And Edmonton didn't always do it and still ended up with the first pick. But the idea was this whole thing. I think Detroit. I mean, Philly did it 1 year too, and they ended up getting Van Riemsdyk, not Patrick Kane. Everybody can do it, at one point, and that was definitely the case.
If you win the lottery.
Yeah, right. But I think it's a great question because it definitely. I mean, there's nothing that gives young defense confidence better than having a goalie like that back there. I mean, and
the reason I thought about it is the goalie market will be pretty limited.
Yeah, it will be.
There's going to be some quality goalies out there, and there's very few teams looking for a goalie.
To me, I look at Calgary.
Calgary's to me a prime one.
They're a great team without a goalie. Edmonton maybe, but and that's depends on how.
That's maybe as well. Yeah, I agree.
Depends on how things go in the playoffs with their goalies.
And the factor that's hanging over every team's head right now is expansion. They have to expose a goaltender. So I mean that's going to be another situation where teams. Yeah. This is going to be a weird year coming up for goaltending because you're going to see teams probably like Montreal signed a 25-year-old goaltender out of the KHL. They have a decent backup in Charlie Lindgren. They have a prospect in Caden Primo. Why do they sign this guy? Because they're going to have to expose somebody in expansion, and they need somebody who can be a backup, and they're covering their bases. And a lot of teams will be doing the same thing.
Yeah.
I really like the more I think about it, Kevin, the more I think that the whole concept of Marc-Andre Fleury and Holtby, there are some similarities there, and one of Fleury's main reasons he was willing to go to Vegas too was the same thing, to get out of that constantly battling for the number one spot. Right. That was definitely a factor there, and it worked out really well for them. That's an interesting thing. Well, before we go real fast here, we're going to do, since the draft may or not be happening in the near future, we're doing our draft lottery simulator for everybody nowadays, even though we don't know if this is the way the draft lottery is going to be.
Yeah, they're going to have to adjust the simulator if they change the
Right, exactly. But let's see who wins today, just for the heck of it, and we'll talk. Today is San Jose. Ottawa wins the pick. That came from San Jose in this one. So San Jose, when San Jose wins the lottery and Ottawa takes that pick, that's a nightmare scenario for San Jose.
Buffalo with the second overall pick.
I mean, Buffalo gets the second overall pick. Yep. New Jersey moves up to the third. Again, New Jersey has and again Detroit, who this draft lottery simulator seems to hate, and they fall to fourth. Right.
The Red Wing fan base thinks that's what's going to happen. They're going to fall, but I keep telling them, the odds, you got a 50% chance of finishing in the top three if you're Detroit. Yeah, not quite 50. I think it's 49.4, but
something with it.
Yeah.
So.
All right. Well, thanks, guys. The question: Did Eklund's fantasy hockey playoffs go DOA? No, I just had because of family stuff. I was unable to travel back into the alternate universe. I will go there this weekend and come back on Monday with a report as to what's been happening. For all of you who care, because family stuff came up this week. As you saw, I missed a couple podcasts and stuff like that. So yeah, I'll be back. I'll be back there. I'm going to go there this weekend for sure. I can't wait to get there. Kevin, thank you so much for joining us and insulting me and all the stuff that you did.
Yeah, for unintentionally being too mean.
You're not too mean. I love the debate today.
That's my job. You're moving into my territory.
Yeah, it didn't come out exactly the way I intended.
Not exactly, but that's fine. I thought it was a really interesting one because it's a kind of a GM versus owner's perspective on this thing. I thought it was kind of unique. Anyway, we'll talk later, guys. Remember, without the buzz, it is just hockey. We will talk to you on Monday. Have a great weekend, everyone.